Units of the Presidential Brigade stopped a Russian assault in the Vremivka area of the Donetsk region. The preparations to repel the assault began after aerial reconnaissance detected Russian units advancing on armored vehicles with improvised anti-drone protection. Their advance took place near the village of Velika Novosilka, where Russians have recently been conducting assault operations in the hope of breaking through the Ukrainian defense. This assault was no exception. The Russians attacked the defenders' positions from two directions, where the 3rd Mechanized Battalion and the 20th Separate Special Forces Battalion of the Presidential Brigade were holding the line. The main losses to the enemy assault groups were inflicted by Chimera, Bulava, and Nova attack UAV units. Thanks to the active work of drone pilots, the enemy equipment was burned or abandoned. The enemy's attempts to save the equipment also failed, as most of the surviving armored vehicles were destroyed by drones with drops. The remnants of the Russian infantry began to flee to the nearby forest belts, where mortars and drones began to target them. A novelty in the clearing of the forest belt was a drone with an assault rifle that finished off the Russian infantry from the air. The drone flew over the forest belt and fired at the remnants of the Russians who were trying to hide. It was developed by the specialists of the Bulava unit, which is currently being actively used against the enemy. Earlier, Militarny reported that the occupiers had sent several columns of armored vehicles to assault in the Vremivka area, which in particular had been stopped by the Presidential Brigade. In one of the areas, the enemy used 8 units of equipment, and the units of the separate Presidential Brigade managed to destroy 2 tanks and 2 armored personnel carriers. Russian forces have suffered catastrophic losses in armored vehicles during the war in Ukraine. Recent estimates indicate over 2,500 tanks and thousands of armored personnel carriers destroyed or captured. Advanced models like the T-90 and T-80 have been neutralized by precision weapons such as Javelin missiles, drones, and artillery strikes. These losses have exposed vulnerabilities in Russia's tactics and equipment, straining their ability to maintain effective offensive operations. The losses go beyond raw numbers, as Russia's inability to replace destroyed tanks and armored vehicles rapidly has created operational gaps on the battlefield. There are no red lines when it comes to support for Ukraine, the French foreign minister has told the BBC. Jean-Noël Barrot said that Ukraine could fire French long-range missiles into Russia in the logics of self-defense, but would not confirm if French weapons had already been used. The principle has been set. Our messages to President Zelensky have been well received, he said in an exclusive interview for Sunday with Laura Quensberg. French President Macron indicated France's willingness to allow its missiles to be fired into Russia earlier this year. But Barrett's comments are significant, coming days after US and UK long-range missiles were used in that way for the first time. Barrett, who held talks with Foreign Secretary David Lammy in London on Friday, said Western allies should not put any limits on support for Ukraine against Russia, and not set and express red lines. Asked if this could even mean French troops in combat, he said, "We do not discard any option. We will support Ukraine as intensely and as long as necessary." Why? Because it is our security that is at stake. Each time the Russian army progresses by 1 square kilometer, the threat gets 1 square kilometer closer to Europe, he said. In the occupied part of the Kherson region, a Russian D-20 howitzer and ammo were destroyed. Russia continues to rely on old Soviet D-20 howitzers and similar artillery in Ukraine due to the scale of artillery demands and challenges in replenishing advanced systems. The D-20, a 152mm towed howitzer introduced in the 1950s, provides reliable and effective firepower in the war of attrition being waged. However, these systems are less precise and slower to deploy compared to modern artillery. The heavy use of artillery by Russia has strained its stock of more advanced systems, forcing reliance on Soviet-era weapons. Furthermore, the massive length of the front line, over 1,000 kilometers, demands high volumes of artillery to maintain pressure, even if they are outdated. Russia has attempted to improve their effectiveness by integrating drones for target guidance, enhancing the precision of these older systems. The continued use of such howitzers highlights supply chain issues within the Russian military and the logistical challenge of equipping forces in prolonged conflict. This reliance reflects Russia's difficulty in producing or acquiring sufficient quantities of modern artillery while trying to sustain its campaign in Ukraine. According to Peskov, there is no freedom of speech in the West. Apparently, only those publications that speak flatteringly about Russia are considered free. By the way, on November 12th, the Russians, without evidence, sentenced 67-year-old pediatrician Nadezhda Buyanova to 5.5 years in prison for allegedly telling the wife of a dead Russian that he was a legitimate target for Ukraine, a claim, once again, lacking direct proof.
There is definitely no freedom of speech in the West, and the events of the last few years have likely proven this. The sheer amount of sponsored content and fake news that even the most respected publications now put out shows this clearly. Believing this 2 years ago would have been hard, but now we see it with our own eyes and accordingly react, even though there are journalists in the West who try to analyze the situation from all angles. They certainly command respect. We work with such members of the press to provide them with information, as they say, directly from the source.
Activity on Russia's only construction yard for liquefied natural gas modules slumped due to Western sanctions, reports Bloomberg. Congratulations to the great geostrategist Putin. Novatek PJSC's Balokamenka facility on the Barents Sea, dubbed the plant to make LNG plants, appears largely mothballed. Satellite data from late October and early November show the site's nighttime light intensity at its lowest since 2019, according to the Payne Institute's Earth Observation Group. The site was intended to become a unique hub for the domestic assembly of so-called LNG trains. However, after constructing 2 trains for Arctic LNG-2, Russia's latest export facility, there's no activity indicating further expansion. The reason is the sanctions imposed by the West on Novatek and all its future LNG projects, including production plants, transshipment facilities, and tankers. According to Laura Page, natural gas and LNG analyst at research firm Kepler, the lack of activity at the facility indicates a delay in the implementation of future LNG projects that were deemed critical for Russia to achieve its goal of reaching 100 million tons a year of LNG export capacity by 2030.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you want to support Warthog Defense, please become our member and get early access to new videos, exclusive members-only videos, and become administrator in comment section. The membership link is in the description.
Every day. We had a guy last week, it's 6 rescues in 6 days. You know, he's doing the job every day.